If you are using Microsoft Authenticator on your phone right now, and hundreds of millions of people are, there is something that happened in March 2026 that you need to understand before you scan another QR code or tap another sign-in link. Because on March 10th, 2026, as part of Microsoft's monthly Patch Tuesday security release, a vulnerability was disclosed that security researchers are calling one of the most significant authentication app flaws discovered in recent years. And the reason it matters so much is not just that it affects an authentication app. It is that it affects the authentication app. The one that millions of people use is the primary second layer of defense, protecting their Microsoft accounts, their work systems, their email, their OneDrive, and in BYOD environments, their corporate infrastructure. The vulnerability has a formal designation. It is CVE 2026-26123. It affects Microsoft Authenticator on both iOS and Android, and it was found not by a large security firm running automated scanners, but by a single independent security researcher named Khaled Mohammed, who wrote up his findings in detail after receiving the CVE acknowledgement. What he discovered was not a small edge case bug. It was a fundamental oversight in how Microsoft Authenticator handled its own authentication handoff process. And understanding exactly what he found, how the attack works in practice, and what you need to do about it right now is what this video is about. Let us start from the beginning. What Microsoft Authenticator actually does, and why this matters. Before we get into the vulnerability itself, you need to understand what Microsoft Authenticator is doing on your phone beyond generating 6-digit codes. Because most people think of it as a simple code generator, and that mental model is precisely why this vulnerability is so surprising. Microsoft Authenticator is a mobile app that generates time-based one-time codes and handles sign-in links and QR-based logins for Microsoft and other accounts. It is widely used for multi-factor authentication on personal phones, including BYOD devices that protect access to corporate and production services. The QR code function is the key piece here. When you set up a new account or add Microsoft Authenticator to a new device, Microsoft's web interface generates a QR code. Your phone scans it. And what happens next is the part that almost no one outside of mobile security research thinks about. That QR code contains what is called a deep link, a specialized URI, which stands for Uniform Resource Identifier, that is designed to open a specific application on your phone and pass authentication data directly into it. The assumption built into this entire system is that when that deep link fires, only Microsoft Authenticator receives it. That is the foundational security guarantee the whole setup is built on. CVE 2026-26123 was disclosed as part of Microsoft's March 2026 Patch Tuesday on March 10th, 2026. The vulnerability allows a malicious application that masquerades as Microsoft Authenticator to receive enough data during a sign-in flow to impersonate a user under certain conditions. Microsoft rates the issue as important and assigns a CVSS v3 base score of 5, and lists the underlying weakness as related to improper authorization in a handler for custom URL schemes. But here is where the story takes a turn that should make every Microsoft Authenticator user stop and reread that sentence. The unclaimed deep link. How the attack actually works. The researcher who found this vulnerability described his discovery in precise technical terms, and what he found was almost embarrassingly simple, once you understand how mobile app deep links function. Microsoft Authenticator's MSA deep link, designed to securely onboard and sign in users or enable two-factor authentication via QR codes, was not actually being claimed by the app itself. This oversight created a perfect storm. Any malicious app could intercept authentication tokens, leading to complete account takeover, bypassing two-factor authentication, password requirements, and every other security layer Microsoft had in place. Read that again because it is important. The deep link that Microsoft's own system uses to pass authentication data into Microsoft Authenticator was not registered as belonging to Microsoft Authenticator. It was unclaimed, and on Android and iOS, when a deep link fires and no app has officially claimed it, any app that registers to handle that URL scheme can receive it. There is no competition prompt asking you which app should handle it. The malicious app wins by default. When a user scans a QR code with their phone's native camera and taps Open Link, clicking that link opens the attacker's application. Since Microsoft Authenticator had not claimed its own deep link, any app could claim it. The malicious app wins by default. The researcher built a proof of concept to demonstrate this. The malicious app registers itself to handle the MSA URL scheme. The user scans a legitimate Microsoft setup QR code with their camera, the exact thing Microsoft instructs users to do when setting up the app. They tap Open Link. The authentication token, the code that completes the sign-in flow, is delivered directly to the attacker's application instead of Microsoft Authenticator. The attacker's app captures the token, sends it to a remote server, and uses it to authenticate as the victim. The user sees nothing unusual. There is no error message. There is no warning. From the user's perspective, the QR scan simply did not seem to work. You just handed your account to an attacker. But here's the thing. You would never know what an attacker can do with your authentication token. This is where the severity becomes real. When that authentication token is captured, what exactly does the attacker have access to? A malicious app receiving a one-time code or sign-in information can potentially use it to complete login flows to services that trust Microsoft Authenticator codes and access the information and services available to the compromised account, including email, files, cloud apps, or production systems in a BYOD context. From there, an attacker could potentially pivot to additional accounts if those are also protected by codes delivered via Authenticator on the same device. In a corporate BYOD environment, the blast radius from a single successful exploitation of this vulnerability extends far beyond a personal Microsoft account. A compromised authentication token can open access to Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Teams, Azure services, corporate email, and any enterprise system protected by conditional access policies. The attacker does not need the user's password. They do not need to defeat any other security layer. The authentication token is the key, and they have it. The Dutch National Cybersecurity Center pointed out that CVE 2026-26123, which affects Microsoft Authenticator for Android and iOS, could be exploited by attackers via a rogue app to catch the victim's sign-in in a man-in-the-middle attack. Because successful abuse depends on various steps in social engineering, large-scale abuse is not likely, but can be expected in targeted attacks by technically high-level actors. That last sentence is the critical nuance to understand. This is not a vulnerability that a script kiddie can deploy at mass scale with an automated tool. It requires a malicious app to be installed on the target's device. And it requires the target to scan a QR code during the window when the malicious app is present and claiming the URL scheme. That combination of conditions limits the probability of random opportunistic attack. But it fits precisely within the attack profile of sophisticated targeted threats: corporate espionage, nation-state actors, and high-value account targeting. The users who need to worry most about this vulnerability are not random members of the public. They are IT administrators, executives, security professionals, developers with production environment access, and anyone whose Microsoft account is a high-value target. What Microsoft said, and what they didn't. Microsoft explained the danger in the security advisory. User interaction is required because the user must have a malicious application installed on their device and then accidentally select that application as the handler for the sign-in deep link. This can occur when the user scans a QR code or taps a sign-in link and chooses the malicious app instead of Microsoft Authenticator, causing the sign-in flow to be handled by the attacker-controlled app. Microsoft's framing of this as requiring the user to choose the malicious app is technically accurate, but misleading in practice, and researchers noted this directly. According to the researcher who discovered this vulnerability, the legitimate Microsoft Authenticator app did not previously register itself as the handler for deep links into its own custom URL scheme. This means the Microsoft advisory may be too optimistic about how much user interaction is required to trigger exploitation. The distinction matters. Microsoft's advisory implies the user makes a deliberate choice. The reality is that in the specific scenario where Microsoft Authenticator has not claimed its own deep link and a malicious app has registered to handle that scheme, the user makes no conscious choice at all. They tap a link and their data goes to the wrong destination with no visible indication that anything unusual has occurred. Security teams at threat intelligence firms noted that any CVE touching an authenticator is a direct threat to MFA integrity. If this leaks token seeds, TOTP codes, or account metadata, the blast radius is significant. They advise pushing mobile users to update the app immediately and treating any MFA-related authentication anomalies in auth logs as elevated priority until more technical detail on the vulnerability became available. This is not the first time Microsoft's MFA infrastructure has faced a serious security challenge. In 2024, Oasis Security's research team uncovered a separate critical vulnerability in Microsoft's MFA system. The bypass was simple. It took around an hour to execute, required no user interaction, and did not generate any notification or provide the account holder with any indication of trouble. The exploit involved weaknesses in the time-based one-time password system used in MFA, where Microsoft's implementation allowed attackers to repeatedly guess 6-digit codes due to insufficient rate-limiting mechanisms. That vulnerability affected more than 400 million paid Office 365 accounts. Microsoft patched it. And then, in March 2026, a different kind of vulnerability appeared in the Authenticator app itself, affecting the same user base through a completely different attack vector. What you need to do right now. There are 3 actions here, and they are ordered by urgency. The first action is immediate and non-negotiable. Update Microsoft Authenticator on every device where it is installed right now. Do not finish watching this video first. Open your phone's App Store and check for updates to Microsoft Authenticator. The fix for CVE 2026-26123 is already included in current releases, so installing updates is the most effective mitigation. On iOS, open the App Store, tap the Account button at the top of the screen, and scroll to Microsoft Authenticator to update it. On Android, open the Play Store, tap your profile icon, and go to Manage Apps and Device to find and update it. The patch is available. It is in the current release. There's no technical barrier to applying it right now. The only question is whether you do it before or after this vulnerability is used against someone you know. The second action is about your behavior when setting up authentication going forward. The attack scenario involves a malicious app convincing the user to select it as the handler for the sign-in or QR code-driven authentication flow. When that happens, the malicious app can receive data it should not. Provide concrete guidance to users. Do not accept or select unknown apps when asked to handle a sign-in or QR code flow. Only approve handlers that match the official Microsoft Authenticator branding and store listing. When you scan a QR code to set up authentication or sign into a Microsoft account, pay attention to which app opens. If you are prompted to select an app to handle the link and Microsoft Authenticator is not the option presented, stop. Do not proceed. Something is wrong with your device configuration, or a malicious app has registered to intercept that handoff. The third action applies specifically to high-value users, security-conscious individuals, and anyone managing corporate or production access on a mobile device. This vulnerability is a strong signal that it is time to reassess how you authenticate, and to consider moving beyond TOTP-based app authentication entirely for your most critical accounts. The honest conversation about Authenticator apps in 2026. This vulnerability did not happen in a vacuum. It happened to the most widely deployed authentication app on the planet, and it revealed a class of weakness, deep link hijacking, that is not unique to Microsoft Authenticator. It is a risk that exists wherever mobile apps use URL schemes to handle authentication flows without properly claiming and protecting those schemes. But it also surfaced a broader conversation that the security research community has been having for years and that most everyday users have never been part of. TOTP-based authentication apps, the kind that generate rotating 6-digit codes, are a significant improvement over SMS-based two-factor authentication. But they are not the ceiling of what is available. They are the middle layer. And events like CVE 2026-26123 are exactly the reason security professionals recommend moving beyond TOTP to phishing-resistant authentication for any account that matters. Passkeys and FIDO2 cryptographically verify that you are on the real website. A fake site cannot complete the authentication because the keys will not match. Use passkeys and FIDO2 where available. PDQ for the highest value accounts, primary email, financial services, cloud infrastructure, corporate systems. Hardware security keys represent the current, strongest available option for everyday users. Hardware-based authenticators like YubiKey provide the highest security because they store cryptographic secrets in tamper-resistant hardware. A hardware key cannot be intercepted by a malicious app because the cryptographic operation happens on the physical device itself, not on your phone, and the authentication is bound to the specific site you're visiting. A deep link hijack attack has no surface to exploit because there is no deep link in the FIDO2 authentication flow. When security professionals simulated phishing attacks in lab conditions, hardware security keys prevented 100% of credential theft attempts. For users who want a software-based authentication app with a stronger privacy and security posture than Microsoft Authenticator, the independent security community consistently points to specific alternatives. Aegis Authenticator is best in class for Android users who prioritize privacy. It is open source, uses an encrypted vault, requires no cloud account, and allows users to export encrypted backups themselves. NT-Auth is open source with end-to-end encrypted cloud sync and works across Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, Linux, and web. Both are auditable by independent researchers in a way that proprietary apps are not, and neither collects telemetry from the authentication process. Most Authenticator apps are unnecessary privacy risks. Google Authenticator sends your TOTP secrets to Google's cloud, and they are not end-to-end encrypted. Microsoft Authenticator collects telemetry. Use open source alternatives. Your second factor should not be a surveillance tool. PDQ. This is a real trade-off to weigh. Microsoft Authenticator's deep integration with Microsoft 365, Entra ID, and passwordless push notification workflows makes it genuinely difficult to replace in pure Microsoft Enterprise environments without significant workflow disruption. If your organization requires Microsoft Authenticator specifically for conditional access policies and enterprise SSO flows, The right immediate action is ensuring the app is updated and working with your IT team to evaluate the migration path to passkey-based authentication. If you are a personal user or a small business user who chose Microsoft Authenticator simply because it was the most visible option in the App Store, CVE 2026-26123 is a reasonable moment to evaluate whether a privacy-respecting open-source alternative better serves your security posture. The broader lesson. There's a pattern worth naming directly. Microsoft's MFA systems have now faced two significant security challenges in the span of roughly 18 months. In 2024, it was a rate-limiting failure that allowed brute force bypasses of TOTP codes across 400 million accounts. In March 2026, it was an unclaimed URL scheme in the Authenticator app itself that allowed deep link hijacking and authentication token interception. Neither vulnerability was the result of exotic research that required nation-state resources to discover. Both were found by independent researchers using techniques that are well understood within the security community. When MFA is compromised, it quickly switches from a security tool to a significant attack vector. Organizations must act to adopt patches and reconsider their reliance on outdated MFA solutions. Authentication systems based on shared secrets are inherently vulnerable. We must strive toward passwordless authentication solutions, especially for net new implementations. The lesson is not that MFA is bad. MFA is essential. The lesson is that any single security layer, no matter how widely trusted, is not the final answer. Updating Microsoft Authenticator immediately closes the specific vulnerability disclosed in March 2026, but it does not eliminate the class of risk that the vulnerability represents. Moving toward hardware-based phishing-resistant authentication for your highest value accounts, keeping all authentication apps updated without exception, reviewing which apps are installed on the devices you use for authentication, and treating any unexpected behavior during sign-in flows as a potential security event. These are the habits that actually reduce your attack surface over time. The 6-digit code on your phone screen has always felt like the last line of defense. CVE 2026-26123 is a reminder that it was never designed to be. It was designed to be one layer in a system that should have more. Update your app, review your authentication setup, and take the next step in your security posture before the next researcher finds the next CVE.